Thank you, Marilyn. Way, way, way back, when I first began to preach after I graduated from high school, from college, I accepted the ministry at the Greenford Christian Church in Greenford, Ohio. Now, you have to understand that Greenford was a small country town. They had a post office, which was unusual. They don't have it anymore. But if you would happen to blink your eyes as you're driving down the road, you would not even know you were in the town. Because you go in and out just about like that. Church was very small. In fact, a lot of the situation that we have here puts me in mind of that particular church. The church has grown down through the years to, well, it's considered one of the mega churches of that area. Close to 2,000 people coming every Sunday morning now. And it sits in the middle of nowhere. But I accepted that church because of the fact that I was close by to a cousin. Laura Spain was my cousin-in-law, and his wife Louise and I were part of the family that had grown up. I told you about our going to the ball game, Pittsburgh Steelers game, as well with Dawn, who was her brother. But it was through his influence that I heard about the church, and through his influence that I decided to accept that particular church. Lawrence Bain happened to be the dean of a junior week at the Brown Lake Christian Assembly, and I went to start preaching at the church in February, and he was had about June, July, had this week in camp, and he asked me to teach in that camp. I looked forward to it because Lawrence and I were chess buddies. We loved to play chess together. There were times that I would go over, Vera and Louise would sit down there and talk, and Lawrence and I would fight over a chessboard. We had fights. I never could beat her as kids, though. But during the week at camp that I was there, we would play chess at night. And during the week, with our eyes drooping because we were so tired, I tried to hold class. But the Vesper speaker of that particular year camp, his first name was Ira. I cannot remember what his last name was, and I do apologize for that. But they decided that because there was a beautiful lake, and the Vesper spot happened to be on the shores of the lake, and we looked out into the lake as we were listening to him preach, he decided to use water-related sermons. I can remember a couple times he got a boat, and he was standing up in the boat trying to preach, and he was one that could not stand still as he was preaching, and almost tipped the boat over every time he was in it. And finally, he decided not to use the boat anymore. But one of the sermons he preached was from the book of Jonah. A very interesting and very entertaining book of the Old Testament. Only 4 chapters, and the chapters are not long. The first, I think the longest is the first chapter. But his outline was very simple, taking each chapter by emphasizing the idea of what the chapter was talking about. In the very first chapter, he talked about running from God. If you recall, Jonah, when he heard the word of the Lord, go out to Nineveh and preach to that city where its wickedness had come up to me. And if you study history, you'll find that Nineveh was a very wicked city, even being vicious to their own people. And Jonah was frightened about that. He said, no, I'm not going to Jonah. I'm not going to take my life in my hands. So he ran in the opposite direction and got on a boat and was headed for what we now know as being Spain. And God was displeased and caused a storm to build. And finally, at Jonah's confession, They tossed him overboard, and God had prepared a great fish, and the fish swallowed Jonah. The second chapter is when he was in the belly of the whale. I didn't. Belly, he was in a whale, but belly, not the belly of a whale. In the second chapter, he came to his senses, and while he was in the depth of that belly, he cried unto God and offered a prayer to God. Actually, he ran to God during that particular time. And as a result of his prayer, the fish vomited him up on the shoreline. And I cannot imagine how Jonah must have felt amidst all that gook that was vomited up. But sure, after he cleaned himself up, he went to the city of Nineveh. Nineveh was a fairly large city, about 3 miles long, 3 miles wide. And according to the Bible, he went through crying out about that they were going to perish because of their wickedness. And the people repented. The whole city repented. Sackcloth and ashes, and cried unto God, and God forgave them. He did not destroy them. He was running, Jonah was running with God. And in the last chapter, the 4th chapter, you find that Jonah was running against God because he got mad at God. You told me to go through and preach to this city about their wickedness. You were going to destroy them. Now you have forgiven them. And Jonah God caused that gourd to build and provide shade for Jonah. When they took him away, God caused the sun to burn that gourd away. Jonah got upset again. Where's my gourd? Where's the shade? And God said, you have mercy upon the gourd. Can't you have mercy upon the people? I like the sermon. And that's not what I want to preach this morning. But I like the sermon. After he preached it, I looked at him and said, hey, I'd like to preach that sermon sometime. Do you mind? Because I understood that it was his sermon. And if I remember his sermon right, he gave me the outline that he used while he was preaching. That was long since lost in the shuffle of papers in my house. But I went back to the church in Greenford and I preached, and everybody told me it was a good sermon. And I worked it all myself. I did not use his outline except for the basic points. But it just so happened that Billy Graham was holding a revival. That revival was being televised. And during the revival, he preached the self-same sermon that I did. Boy, that opened the door for the people of the church at Greenford. I did not hear the end of it. You stole Billy Graham's sermon to preach. I heard that they were just doing it good nature, and I enjoyed it. But I quickly refunded. I said, I preached it first, so he stole my sermon. And we kept going back and forth like that. You know, I've come to the conclusion that as long as the church has existed, and as many sermons that have been preached, that it is impossible to preach an original sermon. Somebody has probably preached what I am preaching sometime in the history of the church. But this past week, I got enamored, extremely interested in that prayer of Jonah in the 2nd chapter. When he was running to God. And I tried to picture in my mind what Jonah would be experiencing as he was in that well belly. I got thinking as I was going through this idea, how desperate would he have been? Where was his hope? I'm sitting there in where he was, knowing the situation in which he was experiencing. He would soon be devoured by the acids of the stomach to the point that he would be eaten by the well. And there was absolutely no escape for him. And I'm sure that Jonah was thinking, I need to get God's forgiveness so that I don't have to worry what's going to happen after death. Listen to this prayer. And consider as we read it the desperation of Jonah as he prayed. Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly. It said, I cried by reason of mine afflictions unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I. And now hear this my voice. For thou hast cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All the billows and all the waves passed over me. Then I said, I am cast out of thy sight. Yet I will look again towards the holy temple. The waters... lost my place. The waters passed over me, and I said, cast out of thy sight, and I will look again to the holy temple. For some reason it didn't copy the way I wanted it. The waters compassed me about even to the soul. The depths crossed over me round about. The weeds wrapped around my head. I went to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth and the bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from corruption, O Lord thy God. When my soul fainteth within me, I remember the Lord's, and my prayer came unto me, unto thy holy temple. They that observe thine vanities forsake their own mercy. But I will sacrifice unto thee with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. And thy soul, the Lord spoke unto the fish, and have vomited out Jonah on the dry land. I'm sorry for the difficulty I've had in reading that. Now, there's several things I want to say. First of all, I believe that this is an actual event. A lot of people think that it's a parable, an allegory, or some sort of a myth that was drawn for the purpose of trying to get people of God to think about something else. Jonah is mentioned again in 2 Kings 14:25. So he was an actual person of the Old Testament. I don't believe that it was a well that swallowed him. I tried to make that clear when I was joking around about being in the belly of a well. God prepared a special fish with a special time. I've heard all my life that fish at a whale's throat is not big enough for him to well to swallow a man. That there have been cases in history where people have been swallowed by a whale, and after that whale was harpooned and captured and taken back to port and butchered, the people become unalive. I know several stories of that happening. And being allowed to be able to talk about what's going on. So as we read this, we need to realize that Jonah actually experienced what he said. And there are certain things about this prayer that have stood out in my mind to the point that I think we need to understand the power of prayer. Number one, God knows where we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. I think there's no way that we can hide from God. First of all, that was demonstrated when Jonah was in the boat. God caused a storm to arise, and for Jonah to make a confession and be cast out. God knew, he prepared that fish, and he knew that Jonah was in the belly of the fish. I heard people say, well, I don't think God knows I did that. I had an occasion one time to call in the jail up in Michigan to one of the sons of one of the leaders of the church. And he had done some things that he should not have done. And I called in jail to be able to try to get this young man to come back to the church. And I can remember him looking at me and says, Phil, he says, when I was doing this, I didn't think God knew I was doing it. There's nothing we do in our life that God doesn't know about. There's nothing that we do that is not known to God. And I want you to notice that the Bible in Jonah says, out of the depths of hell cried I. Second verse. Later on, he said, when my soul fainteth within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto me, unto thy holy temple. God knew where Jonah was. He knows where we are. The second thing I think we ought to see here, that God will hear our prayer, no matter where we utter it. I think that's an interesting fact. There are times that God will not hear our prayers, but as far as our prayer that is sincere, prayer according to the teaching of the Scripture, God will hear our prayers, no matter where we are. We can get some of the worst circumstances of our life, and God will hear us. I think God hears prayers. I think a lot of times that what we emphasize as being a circumstances that is happening, that it is actually God answering our prayer. God knows what we need even before we ask. And therefore we need to understand that God will hear our prayers. And God will answer our prayer. Point number 3. God will answer our prayers. I think we need to have a faith in God. I have a funny, we'll talk about this later on if you want to talk about it. I have a funny view as far as answered prayer is concerned. And I want you to hear what I'm saying and hear it clearly. God will never say no to a prayer that we offer. He says, whatsoever you will ask in my name, I will do it. We need to have faith in our prayers. Now, it may not be the answer we want, but I think God will answer that prayer according to His will. I don't like the idea that people teaching others, well, God might say yes, He might say no, or He might say maybe. I don't find that in the Scriptures. God will answer our prayers because we pray, Thy will be done in our life, and His will be done. Fourth, I want you to notice that this is the point I want to make. When we hit rock bottom, we need to depend upon God. Jonah was at the bottom of the barrel, they say, or the bottom of the belly. I'm not sure how you want to say it. Before we hit rock bottom, I think of our nation, and I want you to think about this just for a while. I think of our nation. 9/11 brings to your mind what? After 9/11, what happened to our cities? The streets were lined with American flags. Churches were experiencing some of the highest attendances they ever did. And then people realized we had hit rock bottom. And they were calling upon God for God to help them. There were many others in similar circumstances in the Bible. The prodigal son, for instance. He had a job whereby he had to feed the swine, and swine are the negative or no-nos as far as the Jews were concerned, before he came to the realization he needed God. What did Peter do after he denied Jesus 3 times? He went out and wept bitterly, and I'm sure he prayed. Paul on the road to Damascus, when he went into Damascus, and I was there after he met the Lord on the road to Damascus, he prayed for 3 days and 3 nights before he was told to rise and be baptized and wash away his sins. Elijah of the Old Testament, prophet of God, under the juniper tree in 1 Kings 19. All these are examples of people who have, in their lives, were at rock bottom. And they turned to God in prayer. I think we need to, as Christian people, be concerned about relapsing or going back into the ways of the world. Ruth works with drug and alcohol abuse counseling. And one of the things that they've been taught as far as this counseling is concerned is that eventually somebody will relapse, and you need to be there for them. My Bible tells me, don't be weary in well-doing. It also emphasizes the idea that we need to keep on keeping on, and that we ought to do the will of God. And the last thought that comes to my mind as I think of this prayer: hindsight is better than foresight. Oh, I think back over my life. If I had known I was going to live this long, I would have taken care of my body a lot better than I have. I think all of us feel that way. If we think back over our life, we can see things that we have done that probably would have done differently. I think we ought to trust the Lord, put our hands in His hand. I don't know about tomorrow, but I know who holds my hand. Prayer is important. Prayer is important. And we as Christians, we need to emphasize the idea of prayer in our life. When was the last time that you had prayed for our government leaders? When was the last time you prayed for God to send workers into the vineyard that souls might be saved? When was the last time you prayed, "Here am I, Lord, send me"? Jonah, out of the depths of hell, prayed. His prayer was answered. And he did the will of God. May we take his example and follow. We're going to be singing our song of invitation, softly and tenderly. If anyone here needs to make a decision, as we sing the first verse only, we invite you.